The seven rays represent fundamental cosmic energies that shape human consciousness and development through distinct archetypal patterns, each carrying unique qualities that manifest in our personalities, souls, and spiritual evolution. These ancient esoteric principles find remarkable parallels in modern psychological frameworks, from Jung's archetypes to personality typologies, revealing a profound underlying pattern to human psychological development that transcends time and cultural boundaries. By understanding your unique ray constitution, particularly your soul ray and personality ray combination, you gain insight into your spiritual purpose, psychological tendencies, and evolutionary path, allowing for a more conscious participation in your own transformation and the collective evolution of humanity. Have you ever wondered why certain souls seem to vibrate with power and authority while others radiate compassion and wisdom? Why some individuals naturally gravitate toward intellectual pursuits while others find their calling in artistic expression? What if these differences aren't merely personality quirks or products of conditioning, but reflections of fundamental cosmic energies that have shaped your consciousness since the dawn of your soul's journey? There exists an ancient esoteric science, largely hidden from mainstream understanding, that maps the very architecture of consciousness itself. This wisdom tradition speaks of 7 fundamental rays of divine energy that emanate from the heart of creation, each carrying distinct qualities that shape not just human psychology, but all manifestation in our universe. What modern psychology has only begun to glimpse through concepts like archetypes and personality dimensions. Esoteric traditions have studied for millennia through the science of the 7 rays. All the most powerful ideas in history go back to archetypes, wrote Carl Jung. Yet, even he was touching only the surface of a much deeper cosmological framework that has been preserved in the mystery traditions. Today, we'll journey beyond that veil of ordinary understanding to explore how these 7 fundamental energies create the blueprint of your consciousness. Fellow traveler on the path of self-discovery, I invite you not as a casual viewer, but as a conscious soul momentarily clothed in physical form. A soul composed of specific ray energies that have shaped your journey across many lifetimes. The mystery schools have long taught that we are not merely physical beings having occasional spiritual experiences, but spiritual beings having a temporary human experience. Your true identity extends far beyond your current personality, with its familiar patterns and tendencies. According to esoteric psychology, you possess both a soul ray that remains constant throughout all your incarnations, and a personality ray that shifts with each lifetime. This understanding offers a profound key to unlocking the purpose of your current incarnation. Alice Bailey, channeling the Tibetan master Dijwal Khul, revealed that each person has a soul ray that remains the same through all their incarnations, and a personality ray that is different for each incarnation. Think of your soul as a prism through which pure divine light flows, separating into these 7 distinct qualities that compose your unique spiritual signature. Tonight, I invite you to discover which rays most powerfully influence your consciousness, and how this knowledge can illuminate your evolutionary path. Our journey tonight will take us through ancient wisdom and modern insights, weaving together a comprehensive map of human consciousness that bridges esoteric tradition with psychological science. We'll explore how the 7 rays, these fundamental streams of divine energy, have been understood across civilizations from India to Egypt, from ancient Greece to Tibet. We'll decode how each ray manifests specific virtues, challenges, and purposes, from the powerful will of the first ray to the ceremonial organization of the 7th. We'll discover how these rays correlate with Jung's archetypes of the collective unconscious, the Myers-Briggs personality dimensions, and developmental frameworks like Erickson's stages of psychosocial development. Most importantly, we'll explore practical methods to identify your own ray constitution, the specific combination of rays that influence your soul, personality, mind, emotions, and physical nature. This knowledge isn't merely theoretical. It offers profound insight into your spiritual purpose, psychological tendencies, relationships, and evolutionary challenges. As Alice Bailey wrote, understanding the rays enables us to arrive at a right understanding of ourselves as ensuing entities, and at a wiser comprehension of our fellow men. This comprehension allows us to cooperate more intelligently with the plan of evolution, participating consciously in our own transformation and the collective evolution of humanity. The concept of the 7 rays extends far beyond any single spiritual tradition. These fundamental energies have been recognized across cultures and epochs, though often described in different symbolic languages. They appear in the Vedic tradition as the 7 horses that draw the chariot of Surya, the sun god. They emerge in Egyptian mythology through Osiris, who, when he enters the ark or solar boat, takes 7 rays with him. In Theosophy, as Helena Blavatsky described, these rays are 7 major types of light substance that compose the created universes. They represent the first differentiation of the divine triplicity, the one becoming the many through a 7-fold emanation of consciousness. As the Lucis Trust explains, the 7 rays are the first differentiation of this divine triplicity. From 3 major rays, 4 minor rays unfold to reveal the 7-fold nature of divinity. This 7-fold pattern permeates our experience of reality, from the 7 colors of the rainbow to the 7 notes of a musical octave, from the 7 days of the week to the 7 major chakras within the subtle body. Esoteric philosophy suggests this recurrent pattern isn't coincidental, but reflects a fundamental structure of reality itself. According to Alice Bailey, these rays divide everyone in the human race into the 7 psychological types, creating a basic template for human consciousness. The concept spans beyond Eastern traditions. In Christian mysticism, they appear as the 7 angels of the presence, while Kabbalistic wisdom correlates them with the 7 lower Sephiroth of the Tree of Life. This remarkable cross-cultural consistency points to an underlying reality that transcends cultural conditioning. These are not merely symbolic constructs, but energetic realities that shape consciousness itself. Let us now explore each of the 7 rays in turn, understanding their essential qualities and how they manifest within human consciousness. The first ray of will and power carries the dynamic force of divine purpose. Those strongly influenced by this ray exhibit qualities of leadership, courage, and decisiveness. Alice Bailey associates this ray with the color red, though other traditions link it with blue. First, ray individuals are natural pioneers and trailblazers, displaying remarkable strength of will and determination. At their best, they embody noble courage and selfless leadership. At their worst, they can become destructive, domineering, and ruthless. This ray corresponds with the throat chakra and reflects the divine aspect of will. The second ray of love wisdom carries the magnetic quality of divine love and unifying wisdom. Those under its influence display remarkable patience, compassion, and intuitive understanding. Associated with blue, or sometimes gold, in Bailey's system, second ray individuals naturally gravitate toward teaching, healing, and counseling roles. They possess an inclusive consciousness that seeks to unify and synthesize, though they may sometimes struggle with over-attachment and emotional sensitivity. This ray governs the heart chakra and reflects the divine aspect of love. The third ray of active intelligence manifests as the divine mind in action, abstract thought, philosophical inquiry, and creative adaptation. These individuals excel in strategic thinking, planning, and conceptual understanding. Their virtues include mental clarity and philosophical depth, while their challenges may involve overthinking or manipulation through intellectual means. This ray corresponds with the green color spectrum and governs activities requiring mental adaptability and abstract reasoning. The fourth ray of harmony through conflict creates beauty through resolving opposing forces. Those influenced by this ray are often artists, mediators, and psychologists who thrive in environments requiring balance between contrasting elements. They possess remarkable sensitivity to beauty and harmony, but may struggle with inner conflict and emotional turbulence. The fourth ray carries the yellow vibration and creates the bridge between the three higher and three lower rays. The fifth ray of concrete knowledge brings the precision of scientific thinking. These individuals excel in detailed analysis, technical mastery, and empirical investigation. Associated with the orange spectrum, fifth ray types make excellent researchers, technologists, and surgeons' roles, requiring exact observation and detailed knowledge. Their strength lies in their capacity for exact truth, though they may struggle with coldness or excessive criticism when underdeveloped. The sixth ray of devotion and idealism manifests as passionate dedication to ideals or causes. These souls display remarkable faith, enthusiasm, and one-pointed concentration. Often drawn to religious vocations, humanitarian work, or idealistic movements, they embody the devotional aspect of consciousness. Associated with the violet spectrum, sixth ray individuals can be inspiring leaders when balanced, though they may tend toward fanaticism or emotional reactivity when unbalanced. The seventh ray of ceremonial order brings divine order and organization into manifestation. Those influenced by this ray excel in creating efficient systems, ritualistic precision, and practical implementation. Associated with the indigo spectrum, these individuals naturally understand the relationship between energy and form, making them excellent organizers, ritual magicians, and transformative leaders. They bridge spirit and matter through the power of ordered manifestation. Each of us represents a unique combination of these seven energies, with different rays governing our soul, personality, mind, emotions, and physical body. Your soul ray remains constant across incarnations, while your personality ray changes with each lifetime to provide different evolutionary experiences. What esoteric tradition has known for millennia, modern psychology has begun to discover through its own lens. The seven rays framework finds remarkable parallels in various psychological models, suggesting that both esoteric wisdom and scientific inquiry are mapping the same underlying patterns of consciousness from different perspectives. Carl Jung's archetypes, those universal patterns within the collective unconscious, show striking correlations with ray energies. Jung wrote that all the most powerful ideas in history go back to archetypes, which he described as models of people, behaviors, and personalities that play a role in influencing human behavior. The first ray's qualities of divine will and power correlate with Jung's hero archetype, the courageous figure who transforms the world through decisive action. The second ray's nurturing wisdom resonates with the mother archetype in its positive aspects of compassion and protection. The third ray's abstract intelligence finds expression in the sage or magician archetypes, wielding knowledge and adaptability. The fourth ray's harmonizing qualities emerge through the lover and artist archetypes, constantly seeking beauty amid life's contrasts. The fifth ray's analytical precision appears in the scientist or analyst archetypes, dedicated to objective truth. The sixth ray's devotional nature manifests through the mystic or devotee archetypes, while the seventh ray's organizational talents emerge through the ruler or creator archetypes, bringing order to chaos. Similarly, we can observe correlations between the seven rays and Myers-Briggs personality dimensions. The search results mention that the way to determine a person's ray is through identifying MBTI personality types. For instance, INFJ types often display a personality on the sixth ray with a second ray soul, while INFP types frequently show a first-ray personality with a sixth-ray soul. These correlations suggest that modern personality frameworks are detecting the same underlying energetic patterns described in esoteric psychology, though through a different conceptual language. Even developmental psychology frameworks like Erickson's 8 stages show fascinating parallels with ray energies. Erickson's virtues that emerge from successfully navigating life stages: hope, will, purpose, competence, fidelity, love, care, and wisdom echo the virtues associated with ray development in esoteric psychology. These striking parallels suggest that both traditions are mapping the same territory of human consciousness and development, albeit through different lenses. How might you begin to identify your own ray constitution? While precise determination traditionally required the guidance of an initiated teacher, certain qualities and tendencies can offer clues to your predominant rays. Begin by contemplating your deepest motivations and life patterns. The first ray asks, "What is my will and purpose?" The second ray inquires, "How can I love and understand more deeply?" The third ray considers, "How can I think more clearly and adaptively?" The fourth ray wonders, "How can I create harmony from conflict?" The fifth ray questions, "What is the precise truth here?" The sixth ray asks, "What ideals am I devoted to?" And the seventh ray contemplates, "How can I bring divine order into manifestation?" Your soul ray often reveals itself through your highest aspirations and the qualities that emerge in your finest moments. What Alice Bailey called psychological insight into their soul's purpose. Your personality ray manifests through your habitual approaches to life's challenges and your characteristic way of engaging with the world. Your mental ray shows in your thinking style, your emotional ray in how you process feelings, and your physical ray in how you relate to your body and the material world. Consider which of these rays resonates most deeply with you. Do you naturally gravitate toward leadership positions, expressing the first ray's will and power? Or perhaps you're drawn to teaching and healing roles, manifesting the second ray's love wisdom. Maybe you excel in strategic thinking and philosophical inquiry, showing third ray intelligence. Your natural affinities often point toward your ray configuration. The true value of this knowledge lies not in labeling yourself, but in recognizing the divine energies working through you and how they can be more perfectly expressed. As Master Chokkok Sui noted, understanding the seven rays gives you the ability to see people as they are. By seeing people from different aspects, from different facets, your understanding deepens. This deeper understanding fosters compassion for yourself and others, recognizing that we're all expressions of divine energy working through different ray combinations. Your ray constitution isn't a limitation, but a unique expression of cosmic energy, your particular note in the grand symphony of creation. By understanding it, you can more consciously participate in your own development and contribute your distinct quality to humanity's evolution. From the perspective of esoteric psychology, human evolution isn't merely about individual development, but about the gradual unfoldment of these divine qualities within collective consciousness. Each historical epoch has been governed by particular ray influences, shaping civilizations and cultural movements. We're currently experiencing a significant transition as the sixth ray of devotion and idealism, which dominated the Piscean Age with its religious institutions and ideological movements, gradually gives way to the seventh ray of ceremonial order, associated with the dawning Aquarian Age. This shift explains much of our contemporary experience: the breakdown of old structures, the emergence of new organizing principles, and the growing recognition of the relationship between consciousness and manifestation. The esoteric tradition suggests that collectively, we're moving toward what Bailey called the externalization of the hierarchy, a time when the inner spiritual realities will become more apparent in outer life. This evolution isn't separate from your personal journey, but intimately connected with it. As you develop and express your ray qualities more perfectly, you contribute to humanity's collective evolution. From this transcendent perspective, the seven rays aren't merely psychological categories, but cosmic forces directing the evolution of consciousness throughout our solar system. Understanding them allows you to align more consciously with these evolutionary currents. As Bailey wrote, such knowledge is of inestimable value to the aspirant consciously preparing himself to become of planetary service. Each ray contributes an essential quality to our collective evolution. The first ray brings divine purpose and direction. The second ray provides cohesive love and wisdom. The third ray offers intelligent adaptation. The fourth ray creates harmony through resolving conflicts. The fifth ray brings precise knowledge and discrimination. The sixth ray provides devotional aspiration. And the seventh ray manifests divine order in material form. Together, these seven qualities create a complete expression of divine consciousness in human experience. As our journey draws to a close, I invite you to contemplate your unique ray signature, not as an abstract concept, but as living energies flowing through your consciousness in this very moment. These aren't merely theoretical constructs, but dynamic forces shaping your evolutionary journey across lifetimes. Remember that understanding your ray constitution isn't about confining yourself within a new label, but about recognizing the divine energies seeking expression through you. It's an invitation to conscious participation in your own unfoldment and in the greater evolution of human consciousness. When the first ray of will flows through you, express it with wisdom and compassion. When the second ray of love-wisdom illuminates your path, let it expand beyond personal attachment to universal love. When the third ray of active intelligence stimulates your mind, direct it towards service and the greater good. When the fourth ray of harmony brings both conflict and resolution, trust the beauty emerging through this process. When the fifth ray of knowledge awakens your analytical mind, let it serve the heart's wisdom. When the sixth ray of devotion inspires your idealism, ground it in practical action. And when the seventh ray of order reveals patterns and structures, use them to manifest higher consciousness in everyday life. As you leave this exploration, carry with you the understanding that you are, in essence, a unique configuration of divine light, the cosmic energies of creation focused through the prism of your consciousness. Your journey isn't separate from the universe's evolution, but an integral expression of it. In the words of Alice Bailey, this knowledge enables us to cooperate more intelligently with the plan of evolution. You're invited to become a conscious participant in this grand unfoldment. To know yourself as a soul expressing through specific ray energies and to contribute your unique quality to humanity's collective journey. The ancient Hermetic axiom tells us, as above, so below, as within, so without. The 7 rays that structure the cosmos are the same energies flowing through your consciousness. By knowing yourself more deeply through this esoteric psychology, you simultaneously glimpse the very architecture of creation itself. This is the profound invitation of the 7 rays. To recognize yourself as both a unique soul and an integral expression of the divine pattern that structures all existence.